Excellent. All right, good afternoon. I'm Whitney Thompson, Deputy Director for Workforce Education. And with me today is
Angela, sorry, I thought you were going to say my name, Angela Gerberding, and I am the Associate Director for Integrated Career Programs, also with ICCB.
And I also want to introduce our Senior Director for Adult Education. Kathy, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Kathy Olson-Tracy. I'm the Senior Director for Adult Education and Literacy, as Whitney said, and I'm so excited to see everyone jump on this meeting.
All right, so today we're going to be talking about the ability to benefit, a state-defined process, and we'll go a little bit into what ability benefit is, what this plan could mean for you, as well as next steps. So the purpose of today's meeting is to share information with you on this alternative process. And we're hoping that the audience includes a variety of folks, including academic leadership, financial aid, admissions, enrollment management, of course, adult education administrators, because this will impact all of you. We also want to take this time just to raise awareness about ability to benefit provisions, and we'll talk about the three different processes that are currently available to you all. But also to inform our community college system on how to opt into this particular alternative plan. The documents available to you include the plan itself, which was presented to our board a couple weeks ago, the institutional participation form, which we will talk about, and a one-pager that kind of summarizes the plan in a page or less. So for those of you who haven't worked in the ability to benefit space or know maybe some general information about it, we're going to dive a little deeper and just talk about what ability to benefit is, to make sure that you all have the foundation in order to make a decision for your institution on participation in the plan. And if you want to introduce yourselves in the chat, just so we can see who's all here, that's always helpful too. We would love to see that. And if you have questions, please enter those in the chat, but we will have time at the end to address those as well, because we will be putting together an FAQ for you all. This presentation is being recorded, as we said earlier. We will have another informational webinar. It's a duplicate information this Friday. But we wanted to make sure that we gave at least 2 times for folks to be able to join in and ask questions and get those questions answered. So ability to benefit is a provision of the Higher Education Act that allows adults without a high school diploma or its equivalency to benefit from Title IV federal financial aid. That's the benefit, benefiting from financial aid. In order for students to do this, they must either, 1, pass an approved standardized test, and we have that linked toward the end of our presentation, the different tests. You have Next Gen, AccuPlacer, there's a list of approved tests for that. Or a student may successfully attain 6 college credit hours, and we'll talk about some of the barriers to that. Or 3, they can complete a state process as approved by the Secretary of Education, and that is what we'll be talking about today. So there are 2 currently approved ways in which your institution can utilize ability to benefit, and we're now offering a 3rd way. Yes, and we will be sending out a copy of the slides and linking them on our website, and we'll share that at the end. So as I mentioned here earlier, students have to participate as a part of in a career pathway program. So what is a career pathway program? And this is one of the main differences from ability to benefit pre-2012. There's kind of a long history to ability to benefit. Before 2012, you didn't have this career pathway requirement. It was pretty flexible. Institutions utilized ability to benefit more often than they do now. Then those provisions were rescinded. And then in 2015, at the beginning of 2016, ability to benefit was reintroduced with these additional caveats. And we'll talk about some of those barriers as well, but the career pathway program was one of those. So a career pathway, and for those of you who work in career and technical education, adult education, you should know this already, is that combination of rigorous and high quality education and training. So if you think about your career and technical education programs at the college, they meet many of these criteria, right? They align with the skill needs of industry. They prepare an individual to be successful in a full range of educational options. Your institution includes academic advising and counseling as a part of supporting students in these programs. There, of course, is contextualized and workforce preparation activities built into CTE programs. And so what kind of takes us a step back from just the program itself is 5 and 6, which means that a student must also be enabled to attain a secondary school diploma or its equivalent. And so we would want to see those on-ramps from adult education into credit-bearing programming. So this could be your integrated education and training program, and then of course, help individuals enter and advance within a specific occupation. So we're looking at that comprehensive approach for programs. And again, most of your CTE programs will fit this, these elements here. All right, so I think it's also useful to kind of share with you what ATB implementation looks like in the community college system. So a couple of years ago, we have been promoting integrated education and training, which we'll talk about it more in depth here in a few slides, for several years. And this is that collaboration between adult education and career and technical education, whereas a student can participate in both educational programming to accelerate their ability to attain that post-secondary credential at the same time that they are completing their high school equivalency. But some of the challenges to IETs were how the student pays for the first 6 college credit hours because they can't benefit from federal financial aid. And so we, of course, responded with utilize ability to benefit. And we were met with, yes, but there's lots of barriers. So we wanted to understand what ability to benefit usage looked like, how it was being utilized, if it was being utilized, and then, of course, those challenges. And so we had a very high response rate. About 69% of the community colleges in the system responded. We attended a convening in Washington with the U.S. Department of Education, working with other states and stakeholders, listening to them and hearing ways in which their state has supported their institutions to implement ATB. So in this survey that we administered in 2019, we asked if the college was utilizing AT provisions at all. And about 40% said yes, 30% said no, and the other 30-ish% said unknown. And this is actually a pretty high response rate or pretty high utilization rate. However, it was being utilized on a very small scale, a couple of students per year. And then we asked specifically if it was being utilized for those enrolled in IET programs. And about 35%, 36% said yes. And then the other obviously said no. And so we'll talk about some of those challenges here. Some of the challenges that were brought forward in terms of institutional challenges include lack of awareness and knowledge about ability to benefit. A lot of times we would hear from adult education administrators or even some of our CTE program deans, our financial aid officer is very nervous about the language around ability to benefit, and we just don't feel like it's flexible enough, or we don't feel like we have enough processes or documentation in place to meet those criteria. And so we're, we don't want to put our institution at jeopardy with Title IV funding. And so, or, some folks in the college would know something about ability to benefit while others did not. And of course, this comes back to the history where ability to benefit was active for so long in a much more flexible environment, and then was rescinded and then brought back. And of course, there's been lots of uncertainty around what an eligible career pathway program is. And so we've done some work in the state around this as well. So we're hoping to kind of help alleviate some of these institutional challenges. The current provisions are too limiting. We heard that from a number of institutions. And then internal coordination too challenging to implement, because it does take all hands on deck, many different departments within the institution to be able to utilize ability to benefit, to document it, and to move forward. Outside of the institutional challenges, there are a number of student challenges, which is really why we are putting together this third process. So as I stated earlier, the two ways in which a student can benefit from ability to benefit is through that standardized test or the 6 college credit hours. As you know, standardized tests can be costly. They can be time intensive in terms of when to sign up, when they're available to take, where you take them, how long until you get the results back, how long in between the amount of times you can take them in a year. We know that they're not always a valid measure of readiness. They create lots of anxiety for students who aren't utilized or who aren't used to standardized tests the ways in which our students now are. And then of course, the 6 college credit hours can be very costly, especially since our students who are typical adult education students are typically low income. And so they don't have the funding around to pay for the 6 college credit hours. Now, we have had institutions utilize foundation funds to pay for this. Some institutions have been able to partner with their WIOA Title I partner to pay for these 6 college credit hours. But our third process here that we are putting a plan for addresses this by creating a third process, a more sustainable process for this. All right, now I'm going to kick it over to Angela Gerberding, who is going to walk through the beginning part of the state-defined process.
Sure, thanks, Whitney. A little bit of background with this is that this is a plan that has been approved by the board, but we still have to submit to Department of Ed in order for it to be fully approved. But we want to share all this information with you so you know what's going on while we're doing that. Some of the benefits of the state-defined process, as Whitney's mentioned, hopefully it can streamline some of the processes and procedures, make it a little smoother, a little easier for students and staff working with those students. Eligible criteria is a little bit more flexible for adult students. As Whitney mentioned, sometimes they're not test takers. And so we've tried to come up with some other criteria that can also demonstrate their ability to be ready to move on and successfully take and pass college coursework. And we also want to create additional awareness and support around ability to benefit for people in the field to be able to utilize it and benefit students in the long run. The working group that started putting all of these things together back in January of this year, they're all listed on the left side of the screen. I'm not going to read names, but they are people from financial aid, adult education. We had some officers, some, Whitney, help me with the name that I'm blanking on. Academic officers.
Yeah, academic leadership. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. And so we tried to get, again, a variety of people from the field because we want this to be useful and applicable to everybody in the field. So we needed to get everybody's input. The main objectives was we wanted a well-documented process for creating this plan. We, again, wanted all the stakeholders and subject matter experts across the state to help us with this plan. We all reviewed the Department of Ed requirements, and there's two, I think now 3 other states that have approved plans. So we've looked at those to see how they met those requirements, what we could mirror, what we wanted to tweak to make fit Illinois. We wanted to identify recommendations based on effective practices to work into the plan. Any barriers that the colleges were having that we already, talked about, how can we address and perhaps remove some of those barriers, and work with the institutional partners that are actually going to be implementing this at the local level. So the group did lots of work. We're very busy people, but we've come up with this plan. If you move, there you go. So the various elements of this plan, those are the parts and pieces of the plan that we've got proposed. And the majority of those are required pieces from Department of Education. We are not making up pieces. We were fitting their eligibility, their requirements right down the list. So we've got some background, all those kinds of pieces. But we want to align with some current initiatives and priorities that are going on in the state of Illinois. We don't want to be working against each other. We want to make this, again, more aligned and useful to each other. We want to use it as a tool for post-secondary attainment. You've hopefully heard about the 60% by 2025, meaning that 60% of the population has some sort of high quality post-secondary degree or credential by the end of 2025. That's 4 years away. Seems like a long time, it's 4 years. And we also want to use it as a tool for advancing educational equity. We know that Illinois has a very diverse population. And in order to serve those, we need to be able to offer them opportunities to get at least started into the education so they can continue on with that process and earn credentials to move on and get well-paying, good-paying jobs. Next slide, please.
And I just want to add here, Angela, I think, these are 2 really important points for why we're doing this plan. As Angela talked about here in terms of post-secondary attainment, we can't meet this goal alone by making sure that our high school graduation rate is high and that students are matriculating into college. We have to be able to continue to break down barriers for adults. And this is just one way that we are doing this. We understand that this is not going to have a massive impact because this process is very specific to students who, with the right support, can succeed in college credit programming. And so it's not for every student. Not all students will be able to utilize this, right? They're going to have to work through their adult education programming if they don't meet certain criteria, which we'll talk about in the next few slides. But we do feel like this is just one more way that we can eliminate a barrier for students. And of course, the Community College Board is very committed to advancing equity, as Angela was just speaking about. And so we feel that this, again, is one more way to help advance equity within our system and specifically to adults without a high school diploma. Sorry, Angela.
Oh, you're good. Thank you. Program design. So as Whitney mentioned earlier, integrated education and training is a key piece of how ability to benefit can be utilized. Integrated education and training has been in Illinois about 10 or 15 years. Oftentimes it's referred to as ICAPs from the adult ed side. So if you've heard of ICAPs, you've heard of IETs. And in that second bullet, it basically says it's adult education literacy, it's workforce preparation, and workforce training. Those are the 3 required components of this. And so in order to be in adult education, students cannot have a high school diploma. So that's where this it fits in perfectly with ability to benefit. So that's how we are structuring this, primarily around integrated education and training. It also has to be part of the career pathway system, but that fits in with the IET part of this. And then also with IETs and ICAPs are strong wraparound supports. This isn't something that we're just going to send a student off and say, here you go, good luck. We'll see you in 6 months when you finish your certificate. there's support services that go with this that are required pieces of the plan, but also are part of IETs and ICAPs in the state of Illinois. Student eligibility. So previously, Whitney mentioned you had to have 6 credit hours or you had to take a test. And so to get around those things, we have looked at what can we use, what can we do, what kind of resources can we look at? And we know that these are going to be adult learners. So this cannot be done with dual credit students in a K-12 system because that doesn't make them adult students. Learners need to meet other eligibility criteria for federal financial aid. So again, they have to demonstrate financial need. They'll have to have a valid social security number. They have to be a citizen or an eligible non-citizen. So those kinds of other pieces still apply. We don't have the ability to take those off the table from the federal level. Those are there for federal aid. They have to stay there. This is just another way to tap into the federal financial aid. And the learner does not meet those original ATB criteria. So they don't have 6 credit hours or they can't meet that testing level. Ideal candidates are students that are already enrolled in early school leaver transition program or an ICCB approved alternative methods of credentialing for high school equivalency programming. Both of those have to do with work-based high school equivalency kinds of pieces. So that's how they fit into this. And or they have successfully completed a bridge program with adult education. So there's some areas that students can easily come out of that we know they're going to start out eligibility ahead of time. Whitney, did you have something?
Yeah, I was just going to say, and again, we continue to prioritize this as utilizing this for IET implementation. So that's the main vein through which we feel this will be utilized. So students who are typically the students who we are looking at are those who are testing 9th grade and above in terms of their reading, math, and all of those different levels. So, you're looking at students who are right on the cusp of readiness with that additional support. And so we feel that students who are enrolled in these different types of programs here, right, typically meet that eligibility, but there is an assessment that we'll get to, an assessment process that does have to happen.
So there's 2 questions that have popped up in the chat that deal with eligibility. So I thought I'd go ahead and answer them. One from Jacqueline: can students who have a high school diploma but are skills deficient benefit from ATB? No, because they have the high school diploma. So that already makes them eligible for federal financial aid. That's the trigger here, is that if they have a high school diploma, they're eligible for financial aid. If they do not have a high school diploma, that's when then they fall into the ATB category. So Jackie, no, but that's okay, because if they have a high school diploma, they're already eligible. The second question that I'm seeing is from Elizabeth: do they truly have to be beyond age of compulsory education, or can they provide a letter of separation if they are an adult education eligible? Whitney, you may be able to weigh in on this. My guess is that they have to probably be 18 or older for federal financial aid. That may be a financial aid question that we need to find out.
Yeah, Elizabeth, we'll take your specific question down and put that in the FAQ. Thank you for that.
That's a good one.
What about adult learners who are not in adult education, got their high school diploma in another country? So there are some different parameters, I know, within federal financial aid on this, and we would have to look at what this would look like at your institution in terms of assessment. But that's a good question, and we'll look into that as well, Arlene.
Good, thank you. Thanks for the questions. If you've got them, keep coming. We'll keep bringing them. We'll keep reading them and trying to answer them as we go. So this is the specifics of student eligibility. How do you know if a student's actually ready to go? So assessment of each student's existing capabilities through means other than a single standardized test. That initial statement is from the Department of Education. We have to have more than one assessment to determine eligibility. Otherwise, they could take a test or have 6 credit hours. Those already exist. So just giving them a different test is not an option. We need to have at least 2 ways of measuring. So some of those potential assessments that we are proposing are a GED ready practice tests that show that they are there ready to go. Instructor or employer referrals. So if there's somebody in adult ed that says this student is fabulous, they're on time, they're always prepared, they've got their homework, they're doing amazing, they're just struggling with the math content, they're just struggling with the language content, or an employer referral, we can use those. High school transcript review, HSE or ESL assessments, writing samples. If there's writing samples in the class, we can use those. And student interviews. Sometimes talking to the student is the best way we can find out if they're ready to go or not. But whatever it is that we're using, whatever it is you all will be using at your colleges, not us, whatever you will be using, there has to be evidence to document that in the student file. So because there's a monitoring part of this we'll get to, but that may be requested as part of a monitoring that's conducted by ICCB. So whatever it is you're thinking about using, make sure you've got some kind of documentation. So even if you're doing student interviews, just like on a job interview, you've got the questions, write down their answers, and you fill that in that way. Next slide, please.
Yeah, and I would just add,
Yes.
Sorry, Angela, I keep jumping in here.
You're
I
good.
would just add that, when we were putting together this list, this isn't all inclusive. These are just sample potential ways that we have identified that other states are utilizing, or in our conversations with the working group, were brought forward as potential ways of assessment methods. And so, if you're at your institution and you've always thought, I wish we could just use this as a way to say the student is ready, because it always shows that they're ready, but it's not a standardized test, or it's not their GPA, or looking at their high school transcript or whatever. Like, if you have a way that the assessment, a way of assessing a student that you wish you could utilize, like, add that to your process. You just have to do it through 2 or more methods.
Correct. And I want to say that the question that came up about foreign transcripts has been answered in the chat by other experts in the financial aid field. So thank you very much. But we'll definitely still add that to our FAQ with your answers in there. So these 6 boxes are all required by Department of Education. Assessment, we just talked about previously. How are you determining that they're eligible and they qualify to be moved into ability to benefit? Orientation. This is not a generic student orientation that is a map of campus or a tour of campus and you go over everything. This is orientation specifically for being an ability to benefit student. What are the consequences if you drop out in the middle? What are the benefits of being part of this? What are required? All those kinds. So this is an ATB specific type of orientation. It doesn't have to be long, but you do have to have one. Tutoring is, again, a required piece if it's necessary. If students are doing fine, then they're good. But if they seem to need some help with their writing, or they need some help with a math homework, tutoring needs to be available somewhere on campus. And so that's a required piece that you have to have available, but it can vary as to what that looks like. Career goal development. So they need to be able to talk with someone about what is my career goal? Where am I headed? What am I going to do? What does this look like? How many, I want to be a doctor. Okay, well, how long is that going to take? What else do I need to do first? Probably not, we're not going to have a lot of doctor goals on ATB, but again, depending on what they want to go into, they need to understand that there's steps and pieces in that, and how do they get to those? The counseling is academic counseling, could be some just support services of their car broke down and they need a bus schedule. So any kind of counseling, case management, a lot of that times is what this group kind of said. This is really a lot more case management. That's where that falls in. And follow-up. So when students finish a course, how did they do? What are they doing well? Midterms, how did they do? What are they doing well? So checking back in with those students, again, it's not just to send them off and good luck, we'll see you at the end. It's a check back in and follow up and see what's going on. What can we do? What are you missing? What do you feel would help you? You got a B. What could you have done that would have got an A? How can we help you do that? So those 6 pieces are all required pieces by Department of Ed, and they've each got a section, their own little section, not long sections, section in the plan that you can read more about in more detail. And then I think we go back to Whitney.
And the reason those are all really important is because there is accountability with this plan. So in order for us as a state to be able to utilize and continue to utilize an alternative process, students who utilize this process must have the same success rate, or not the same, must be within 95% of the success rate of their peers. So we have a specific calculation that we as a state have to do. So out of all of the participating institutions, we look at the number of students during the applicable award year who either successfully completed, who were retained, or who transferred and remained enrolled in another institution, divided by the number of students who are enrolled in education and training and participating institutions, who remained enrolled, and we take out those who withdrew or who were expelled or received a refund of their tuition. So, and this is very specific success rate language the Department of Education has outlined. We did not put this together. This was the stipulations for them. So the bottom line is that students who utilize ATB have to perform at 95% of the success rate of their peers. And so pretty much the same, right? We can't be below that 95% as a state. And so in order to capture that information, in order to meet that specific accountability goal, ability to benefit as a designation will be added to the MIS manual starting the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2022, so next July. So next academic year is when institutions who opt in to participate as a part of this plan will be able to utilize this process once and if approved by the Department of Education. And then it's just through the normal data collection processes that we have, that the different student level data submissions that reside in our centralized data system will be collected. So it's just one more thing on the usual data collection that occurs. So there's not like a separate report for student PII. There will be what we're calling annual implementation reports, and this is more of a programmatic oversight and monitoring process. So annually, we'll ask that institutions submit a programmatic report that just gives us information on types of programs that students are participating in, types of credentials earned, information about your orientation, how you're meeting the elements of the plan, what your assessment methods are, all of that. So it'll just be some basic overview information, and that allows us to assess the extent to which you are meeting the letter of the law as well as the elements of the plan.
Can I add something in here, Whitney?
Sure.
So with that report, the plan is that is all going to be reported and determined on success rate by career pathway. So if I'm going to pick on Whitney because it's easy to do. So Thompson University submits their report, and they've got a manufacturing pathway and they've got a healthcare pathway, and their manufacturing pathway is at a 75% success rate, but their healthcare pathway is at a 98% success rate. Their healthcare pathway is great, fabulous. When we get into some of this, you'll see that maybe it's the monitoring piece that may be more involved. So it doesn't mean that it's all or nothing. It's still broken out by pathway.
Correct. So even though the Department of Education really only cares about our state percentage, the 95% success rate, we of course need all of the institutions participating to meet that in order for us to do that as an aggregate. So in terms of monitoring, staff will review the annual reports and then may reach out for some of that additional evidence that we have, that you'll have to collect. And again, this is just to safeguard you with the process as well as the Department of Education. And then, if an institution is not meeting that 95% success rate or higher each year, they could fall subject to a corrective action plan, and that's just helping you identify why maybe you fell below this rate. And so we have the provisions here for when a corrective action plan is not required and when it is required. You know, if you're 91% to 94% for 1 year, you don't have to do a corrective action plan. You'll just be on a watch list. But then maybe 2 year, you know, after the second year, you're still below that 95%, then you'll be put on a corrective action plan. If you, and we'll talk about termination here in a minute. But if you fail to meet the 95% success rate for 3 consecutive years, then you just can no longer utilize the alternative process at that point. There is a termination clause within the plan. But, you know, again, this isn't built to be punitive at all. So that's why, you know, we allow institutions to opt in or to opt out at any point. Again, there's no punitive nature to, if you don't meet success rate for 3 years, you just can't use alternative process. You can still use ability to benefit under the 2 current provisions, just not through this one, at least for the terms of the plan, which covers 5 years. But let's say you don't feel like the alternative process really meets your needs and you're not utilizing it and you no longer want to be able to utilize it, then you can opt out. You're not allowed to enroll any more students utilizing the alternative process once you do that, but all students must be grandfathered in. So you must continue to support them if they're mid-program. So until they reach that 6 college credit hours, at which point they're just, they've reached that threshold for benefiting from financial aid. We, the ICCB, reserve the right to terminate the plan at any point. We will, of course, notify you if that happens. I don't anticipate that we will do so unless we're unable to meet that 95% success rate, at which part the Department of Education may have us close out our plan. But again, if we choose not to renew or opt out, you as an institution must continue to support those students until they reach those 6 college credit hours. All right, so what does this mean for you in terms of how do you sign on, how do you opt in, and what are your obligations if you do? Institutional obligations, and I'll pull up the form here in a second. You have to request to be part of the state-defined process. We can't just say the whole Illinois community college system is going to be part of this process. You have to opt in. You have to collaborate internally to enroll, support, and track students per the requirements of this plan. You have to submit those annual implementation reports on an annual basis. Again, that's that programmatic component of that. And maintain a success rate of 95% as defined in section 6 or be in compliance with the corrective action plan in section 9. If you opt in, you do not have to enroll a minimum number of students. You don't even have to utilize the process. It just gives you the option to be able to utilize it. And what you would do, let's say if you decide not to in year 1, or you haven't figured out how to implement this process yet, you would just submit your implementation report and just say, no ATV use, and that's it. So there's not a heavy administrative burden for signing on, more so if you actually implement the process. And we plan to actually provide additional support and training and professional development over the next year while we're waiting approval from the Department of Education, so that institutions feel ready and feel supported in this process. So in order for us to be able to utilize ability to benefit the alternative process for next academic year, the next academic year beginning next summer, next fall, you will need to complete an institution participation form, and I'll show that here in a second, and submit that to Angela by November 12th. That gives you just over a month to talk this over with your colleagues, review the plan, review the requirements, and see if your institution is interested in participating. Because we have to submit the plan and identify the institutions who are participating as a part of the plan by November 15th. Then the Department of Education has 6 months to review and approve our plan. And if we don't hear from them in 6 months, it's automatically approved, which puts us in good shape for a July 1, 2022 start date of the alternative process. All right, let me share the participation form with you. And I can just share that quickly.
And I can tell you that I have 2 colleges so far that have already submitted this form.
Great.
So I can't tell you who they are right now off the top of my head, but if you send it in, I've got it.
All right, so this is just, it's a very simple form. This is what it looks like. It just shows that you're notifying us interest of participating and opting in. It has fields here. It's a PDF fillable form. Identify the college, district number, college designee for the agreement. So who at your college is going to be the main point of contact. And then of course, we're requiring signature by your president. And you'll complete and submit this form to Angela at this email.
And I will send back a consider this received email so you know we have it.
Lastly, Angela, is my slideshow showing?
Yes, you're back to resources page.
We have some resources here. The Department of Education has an updated FAQ for ability to benefit. CLASP, the Center for Law and Social Policy, has a lot of resources. We've worked with them in developing this plan. They have a lot of resources if you're interested. And then of course we have some resources. Now, once I send this out, you'll click this link and you'll find a lot of dead links. We're having some issues with our website, but we're hoping to have that resolved by the end of the day. And it will have this slideshow, this recording, as well as all of the documents that you need. Of course, if you have additional questions, here's my contact information. Here's Angela's contact information. I will be out sometime soon on parental leave. So if you get an auto reply, that's why. But Angela has been working alongside me throughout this whole process and is very knowledgeable when it comes to ability to benefit. So at this point, we will open it up for questions. And I'm going to stop the recording just for and we'll put all of this in the FAQ, but just for so that we can share the recording.
Sure. And I just put my email in the chat if that's easier for you all.